My name is Michael. I'm 34 years old, and back then, I lived in a simple house on the outskirts of Denver. I'd been living there for almost 3 years, and my routine was pretty chill. I worked as a freelance programmer, so I spent most of my time at home. I used to feel safe because my street was quiet, almost secluded, far from the city center. My neighbors were nice, but honestly, I barely saw them. Everyone had their own routine. That night, I was tired from work and decided to go to bed a little earlier. It was a Friday, and I had no plans for the weekend. Maybe that was my mistake, letting my guard down. It all started around 2 a.m. I was lying in bed, the nightstand lamp still on, watching a video on my phone, when I saw something that made me freeze. From the corner of my bedroom window, I noticed a figure standing in my yard, near the fence that divides my property from the one next door. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, but then I realized the person was just standing there, doing nothing, staring at my house. What bothered me right away was that they didn't even move to brush away the hair falling over their face, which was way too weird. It was like they were waiting for something. I didn't know what to do, but I decided to try to get their attention, shouting out the window, "Hey, what are you doing out there?" But they didn't answer. They just calmly turned around and started walking, slowly, disappearing into the darkness. I stayed by the window for a few more minutes, trying to figure out what had just happened. The figure I saw at that hour was enough to make me uneasy, but I tried to rationalize it. Must be some crazy neighbor, I thought. Maybe someone drunk or looking for something. But still, I couldn't shake the strange feeling in the air. I knew it was too late for someone to just be walking around my yard. I decided to take one last look before actually going to sleep. But by then, the yard was empty, and the silence that blanketed the street made me feel increasingly unsettled. Only then did the exhaustion from a full day's work start pulling me back into bed, and I fell asleep, still feeling like something wasn't right. That's when I woke up to a noise. At first, I thought it was the wind hitting the windows, but then I realized it was much clearer and distinct. Soft knocks on the front door. I lay there, frozen, not understanding what was going on. The knocks kept going, but this time they were a little stronger, like someone was trying to get in. My heart started racing, and my body was on full alert. I knew it wasn't just some neighbor or someone lost. It was the same person I'd seen before, and now they were at my door trying to break the lock, calmly but with a disturbing lack of hurry. My brain was in overdrive, but before I could react, one thought hit me. I need to call the police. Now. I grabbed my phone with a trembling hand and struggling typed in the emergency number. The panic kept growing with every second that passed. The knocks on the door became more frantic, followed by a strange sound, almost like he was forcing the lock. I could hear the wood creaking more and more intensely, and that just made my anxiety worse. The operator answered immediately, and with a shaky voice, I managed to quickly explain what was happening. "Someone's trying to break into my house. Please send someone." I could barely finish the sentence, and during that time, the noise of the man trying to force the door only got louder. I tried to remember what he looked like. A tall figure, dark hair, wearing a very plain-looking coat. I had no idea what he wanted, but a visceral fear took over me. I just wanted the police to get here fast. The worst was yet to come. Suddenly I heard something even more terrifying, a noise from the back of the house near the kitchen window. He wasn't just at the door anymore. It seemed like he had moved to try another point of entry. My body went rigid, and I was trying to decide whether to hide or go to the kitchen to check. But something inside me told me not to move. The knocks on the door stopped for a moment, and for a few seconds, the silence was even more unsettling. The sound of my own heavy breathing was all I could hear. I stayed there waiting for the worst, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. Then, a low, almost muffled scream froze me in place. It was like he was calling out for someone, but the voice sounded strange, almost inhuman. The silence stretched out for a few more seconds, but the fear just kept growing. There was no ignoring what was happening anymore. He wasn't just trying to break in, he was enjoying it. Something inside me knew he didn't have normal intentions, like a simple thief. He was watching, planning, and the feeling of being hunted consumed me. The police still hadn't arrived, and I was about to lose control of the situation. That's when I realized that the knocking sound hadn't stopped. It was now coming from inside the house, like the man had somehow found a way in. I didn't know how he'd done it, but the sound of doors and windows being forced open intensified. In that moment, a scream of desperation came from deep inside me, and I clutched my phone like it was my only chance at survival. Then the operator, in a calm voice, told me to find a safe place in the house and lock myself in a room. Something inside me already knew it was pointless to wait for the police. I needed to hide. With the phone still in my hand, I ran to the bathroom. I shut the door and locked it, feeling the adrenaline take over every inch of my body. My hands were freezing, but I knew the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway wasn't lying. He was here, somewhere inside my house, and I had no idea where he was. Suddenly, the bathroom door creaked slightly like someone was testing the lock, and the chilling air made me tremble even more. Time seemed to slow down. I was there, practically frozen, my heart beating so loudly I thought he might hear it. The sound of the man moving around inside the house was clear now. He was getting closer slowly, and the feeling of his presence was overwhelming. I knew he wasn't going to leave easily. The bathroom door kept shaking with every touch, but the worst part was when he stopped. The silence made my stomach twist. I knew he was right there, listening, waiting for the perfect moment to act. Fear turned into something tangible, a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. Then, without warning, the door swung open with a loud creak, but what froze me was the low, distorted laugh that came from outside. It wasn't a regular laugh. It was guttural and sickening, as if he was enjoying my fear. It was at that moment that the phone finally made a sound, signaling that the police had arrived. I could barely hear the sound of the cars, but I could hear the gunfire that followed. I knew the situation had gotten even more dangerous, but a part of me didn't want to know what would happen next. The worst part, though, was when the operator told me, after the silence, that the suspect had escaped before the police could catch him. He disappeared without a trace. There were no more signs of life in the house or on the street. When the police finally came in, they searched the entire house, but nothing was found except the marks of forced entry. He had just left. How he knew where I lived, what he wanted and why, is still a mystery to this day. What happened that night still haunts me, and even after all this time, the feeling of being watched never left me. After that day, life never went back to normal. Fear never fully left me, and my house, which once felt like a peaceful refuge, now felt like a prison. I started noticing strange things around me, like someone was watching me all the time. I'd look out the window every morning before leaving, and even when the day was bright, I felt like someone was following my every move. The police never found the man, and the security camera footage around the area didn't show anything. The feeling that someone knew too much about my routine consumed me, and that's when I decided to move. That place, that neighborhood, no longer felt safe. Within a few weeks I was gone, sold the house, and moved to a new place. I didn't tell anyone why. I just knew I couldn't stay there. To this day, I don't know what he wanted. Maybe he had been watching me for days, maybe even weeks. I never understood why that man got so close to me, but I know he never intended to rob me. The fear he left inside me was more psychological than physical, and that's what haunts me the most. When I look back, I think maybe he disappeared because there was nothing left to do there. But one thing I know for sure, the feeling of being watched, of having someone too close, still stays with me, like a shadow that never fades. That day still haunts me, and maybe, somewhere, that man is still waiting.
Please subscribe our YouTube channel.
I'm a delivery driver for a company in the US, and back in the summer of 2018, I had an experience on a delivery that still makes me uneasy to this day. I was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and my job was all about driving around the city, delivering anything from food, packages, and sometimes even random weird stuff. Nothing too out of the ordinary until that one day when I got an order to a house that was way out in the sticks, far from downtown, in this rural area where all you could see for miles were trees. The address seemed pretty isolated, and I remember thinking to myself, this is going to be a pain. But since it was just another delivery, I didn't think much of it. When I got on the road leading to the house, I started feeling like something was off. The house was old, kind of run down, but what really freaked me out was the porch light. It was flickering nonstop, like there was something wrong with the wiring, or I don't know, some weird light effect. The vibe was heavy, and for a moment I thought about just turning around and ditching it. But I was already so close, so I decided to keep going. I parked at the driveway, and it felt like the air just got thick, like the wind suddenly stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the house, trying to see if anyone was watching me from the window, but everything was pitch black. I took a deep breath and walked up to the door. I rang the doorbell, but no one answered. I stood there for a few moments trying to figure out what to do next. The door was open, but there was a screen door, and I couldn't see anyone inside. I looked around and realized how silent the place was, way too quiet for a house, especially at night. The porch light was still flickering, and everything around looked abandoned. I decided to ring the doorbell again, but still nothing. That's when I started to feel really uncomfortable, like something wasn't right, and I could just feel it. I glanced to the side and noticed a narrow path leading toward the back of the house, almost like a corridor behind it. I figured I might as well check it out. Maybe the person was in the yard or something. And then he appeared. A guy, probably in his 40s, skinny, with pale skin, suddenly stepped out of the shadows near the house. He was dressed simply, but what stood out to me was his eyes. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days, and his eyes were wide open in this strange way. The smile he gave me was forced, and something about him just felt off. He stared at me for a moment, didn't say anything, then finally spoke up. "The delivery's here, right? Follow me." I froze for a second. I knew something wasn't right, but my brain tried to make sense of it. I was just a delivery driver after all. He seemed harmless, but that uneasy feeling was growing by the second. I followed the guy, but the more I walked, the worse the feeling got. He was moving ahead of me, walking slowly like there was no rush, taking his time. The path to the back of the house was narrow, with trees that almost touched each other, making it feel even more creepy. Everything was way too still, like time had stopped. The only sound was the rustling of dry leaves, and even the wind seemed to have given up on blowing. The guy had gone silent, and I started wondering why the hell he wanted me to go to the back. I'd never delivered anything to such a weird, isolated place before, and my gut was telling me to get the hell out of there. But I was so close to finishing the job, and the pay was good. When we got to the back, the guy slowly turned to me and made this vague gesture with his hand, pointing to a door at the far end of the yard. The door was old, looked like it hadn't been used in years, and was covered in a layer of dust and dirt. He then said in a soft, almost inaudible voice, "Leave the package here." At that moment, something inside me triggered a red flag. The feeling of being watched was getting stronger by the second, and the silence in the air was almost suffocating. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something was very wrong there. The guy wasn't moving, just staring at me with those wide eyes, like he was waiting for some kind of reaction from me. I wanted to get the hell out of there more than anything, but something was holding me back from making a sudden move. It didn't feel right to just turn my back and run, but at the same time, the pressure in my chest was only getting worse. I looked at the door, and for a moment it almost felt like it was calling me, like there was something hidden behind it. The guy, though, didn't budge, and that made me even more nervous. It was like he was waiting, studying my reaction, and that made me tense up even more. Not knowing what to do, I took a deep breath and tried to speak, but my voice failed me. When I finally managed to say something, it was just, "I need to go." He didn't respond, but his eyes glinted in a way that sent chills down my spine. He took a step forward, still smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. That made me take a step back. That's when I decided I wasn't delivering that package. Something was really wrong, and I needed to get out of there before it was too late. I started walking back toward the front of the house, trying to stay calm, but my body was telling me otherwise. I felt a cold shiver when I heard the sound of the guy moving behind me, but I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see what he was doing. My breathing was quickening, and the feeling of being followed only got stronger. I didn't look back, but I could feel his presence close. When I finally got near the car, I glanced behind me and saw that the porch light had stopped flickering. The silence was back, but now it felt even more oppressive, like the house was waiting for something. I got into the car with my hands shaking, but I managed to slam the door shut quickly. I buckled up and, without thinking twice, drove off. I looked in the rearview mirror, and for a split second I swear I saw the guy standing at the back door, watching me with those same fixed eyes. What freaked me out even more was that he wasn't moving, like he was watching me until I disappeared down the road. I couldn't shake that image from my mind, and the feeling of being followed lingered until the house was out of sight. It felt like the air was lighter now, but the unease didn't go away. I was relieved to have gotten out of there, but deep down I knew something really strange had happened at that place. I got home, but I couldn't relax. I spent the whole night awake, replaying every detail of what happened at that house, trying to make sense of what was going on there. I tried looking up information about the place, but I couldn't find anything relevant. The address didn't show up on any map, and even when I searched the guy's name, it led to nothing. I didn't know if it was some kind of paranormal experience, a waking nightmare, or if I had really heard and seen things I shouldn't have. That uneasy feeling stayed with me for weeks, and I never made deliveries to such isolated areas again. In fact, I even avoided deliveries in more remote neighborhoods. Something about that night left an impression on me that I still can't explain. Even now, I still think about that house. I never found out exactly what happened there, but I'm not the only one with a strange story to tell about it. A few months later, a friend of mine who works as a delivery driver had to go to that same house. When he told me, my blood ran cold. He didn't know anything about what happened to me, but he described the same sense of unease and the same weird behavior from the guy. He even mentioned that when he tried to leave, he felt like something was following him. The creepiest part is that he told me that after dropping off the package, the porch light started flickering again. I don't know what it is, but to this day, I still have the feeling that house is waiting for something. Whatever it is, I hope I never have to go back there.
Please subscribe our YouTube channel.
I was driving down the highway alone, heading home after a long day at work. I'm not the type to get freaked out easily, but that night, something just felt off. It was pretty late, around 2 a.m., and I was on this long, empty stretch of road in the middle of nowhere. Nothing special, just a never-ending highway with a few scattered street lights. I stopped at a gas station to fill up and stretch my legs. The place was empty except for one guy who was hanging around, almost like a shadow in the poorly lit corners. The guy looked at me with an intensity I couldn't explain. He was dressed pretty simple, just a denim shirt and a hat that covered most of his face, but I could tell there was something off about his expression. He walked up to me quickly, almost like he was expecting me to stop there. When he was just a few steps away, he looked me dead in the eye and said, in a calm but firm way that gave me chills, "You're going to take the next exit. Don't keep going straight." His voice was more of an order than advice. It didn't make any sense, especially since I was already on the right road home. Something felt wrong and I could feel it in my gut. I just stood there for a second, trying to process what he said. I wasn't sure if I should listen to some random guy at a gas station in the middle of the night, but there was something about that moment that made me hesitate. I'm not a paranoid person, but the way he looked at me was unsettling, like he knew something I didn't. He just stood there, not moving, still watching me, waiting for a response. Deep down, I knew it didn't make sense to follow his advice, but something told me it was safer to just keep going and ignore the warning. "It's okay, don't worry about it," I said, more to myself than to him, and turned around to head back to my car. The guy didn't say anything else, but I could still feel the weight of his gaze. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove off, feeling relieved to be away from that stranger. But as the road stretched out ahead of me, a strange feeling stuck with me. I couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror, almost like I was waiting for him to show up again. I knew it didn't make sense, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away, and I couldn't shake the thought that something was wrong, something I just couldn't put my finger on. I kept driving, trying to shake off the discomfort that seemed to follow me. The sound of the engine and the empty road was all I could hear, but my mind was restless. The gas station was behind me, but that guy and his words were burned into my brain. When I reached the next exit, my hand instinctively gripped the steering wheel. It was the exit he mentioned, but something inside me told me to keep going, to ignore his suggestion, and just stay on the path I had already planned. I looked at the road ahead and made the decision not to take the exit. Instead, I accelerated, pushing the idea of stopping out of my mind. I was sure nothing good would come from taking a detour now, but then the weirdness didn't end there. About 10 minutes later, I started seeing lights up ahead, a weak, scattered glow along the road. I wasn't expecting anything there, just an empty stretch of road until the next destination. But as I got closer, the scene became clearer. A group of people was standing in the middle of the road like they were waiting for something or someone. It wasn't a normal group of pedestrians. They were spread out in a strange pattern, almost like they were waiting for something to happen. What stood out the most, besides the fact that they were in the middle of the road at that hour of the night, was that no one seemed to be moving. They were just standing there, motionless, as if they weren't even human. My heart started racing. These people made no sense at all, and the fact that they were standing in the middle of the road made me tense. I slowed down, trying to figure out the best way to get past them. I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, that maybe it was harmless, but something told me it wasn't. I looked at the empty road behind me, and the feeling of being watched hit me again, stronger than before. When I passed by them, a chill ran down my spine. I didn't look directly at any of them, but deep down, I knew they weren't just standing there for no reason. As I drove past that strange group, I started feeling this growing pressure in my chest, like I was escaping something that could be dangerous. I could still see those dark figures in the rearview mirror, looking more like blurry shadows moving subtly, but with an undeniable presence. And then it hit me. What the guy at the gas station had said, "You're going to take the next exit." Did he know something I didn't? It was like I'd been warned about something much worse that was coming. My adrenaline kicked in as I sped up, feeling the urge to get away from that eerie sensation. After passing the group, I tried to calm myself down, but the feeling of discomfort wouldn't go away. The silence of the road seemed even more oppressive, like the night itself was closing in around me. I started looking at the sides of the road as if I was expecting something to jump out from the shadows. The feeling of being followed was palpable, but when I checked the rearview mirror again, no one was behind me. That should have been a relief, but instead I was more uneasy than ever. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything. Maybe it was just a coincidence, I thought. That guy was just crazy. But with every mile, the feeling that something was very wrong kept growing. And then suddenly, on a narrower stretch of road, I saw something that froze me completely. Up ahead, a small light started to appear, and I quickly realized I wasn't alone on the road. The light was coming fast, like it was heading straight toward me, but I couldn't immediately tell what it was. My first instinct was to slow down, but something stopped me from doing it. When the light got closer, I could see clearly. It was a car, but not just any car. It was an old model, and the strangest part, it looked like it was stopped in the middle of the road, its high beams on, but with no one inside. The car was completely stationary, taking up a significant part of the lane. Panic swept over me, and once again, something told me not to stop, to keep going, no matter what. My breath became heavy. The car stopped in the middle of the road, felt like a trap. I knew I needed to make a quick decision, but my mind was completely paralyzed by fear. What should I do? If I tried to swerve, I could crash, and if I stopped, Well, I knew something was wrong there. So without thinking too much, I did what seemed most logical. I floored it and passed the car as quickly as I could. My heart was pounding, and for a moment it felt like the world had slowed down. I glanced at the rearview mirror but saw nothing. No other lights, no movement, nothing that suggested I'd made the wrong choice. It was like the road was completely empty again, but something still nagged at me and my mind couldn't relax. The feeling that I had escaped something dangerous only grew as the road stretched ahead of me. For a long time I didn't see anyone else. The tension eased, but with every mile my body stayed tense, my eyes always scanning the rearview mirror, waiting to see some sign, anything that would confirm I wasn't just fooling myself. But nothing happened. The old car, the guy at the gas station, the group on the road, it all seemed to vanish as quickly as it had appeared. When I finally spotted the first city lights in the distance, I knew I was out of danger. However, the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something, that something was still behind all of this, stayed with me for the rest of the drive. I got home a few hours later, still buzzing with adrenaline. When I parked the car in the garage, the relief was so intense that I almost forgot to unbuckle my seatbelt. But when I got out of the car, a strange feeling washed over me again, as if the terror of the road hadn't completely ended. I looked around, expecting to see something, anything that would confirm my unease, but everything was silent. The house was exactly how I'd left it. However, when I went inside and checked my phone, I noticed a missed notification from a friend with a simple message. "Did you see the news? A group of people was found on a deserted road near..." And he completed it with the name of the place where I had been, right in the stretch I had avoided. What unsettled me the most was the last part of the message. They were all dead, but there were no signs of a struggle. I never traveled that road again, nor did I ever stop at a deserted gas station in the middle of the night. Even now, years later, I still think about that guy, that warning, and that group of people. Did he know something I didn't? I avoided what could have been a nightmare, but somehow that night still lingers in my mind. And to this day, the feeling that something was following me, something that shouldn't have been there, hasn't disappeared. Sometimes I wonder if it was a real warning or just a coincidence. But honestly, I don't know what would have happened if I had followed that man, if I had taken the exit he suggested. I only know that in that moment, my instincts saved me, and it was by the skin of my teeth.
Please subscribe our YouTube channel.